Hello out there. I'm the oldest nerd. It's time once again for Talking Movies with Professor O. And today, Professor O, who is near Oklahoma, he's in Oklahoma somewhere. I've never understood exactly where in Oklahoma you are, but I understand it's cold there.
Near the hill, in the hills of the Ozarks, the foothills of the Ozarks is where we
There you
are.
go.
Yes, and it's chilly up here. Yeah,
And
five
and we're
inches of snow or so. Yeah,
whoa,
I think even more like Tulsa got 12, and then I think we got somewhere maybe even 7, 8, somewhere in there. So
wow.
a lot of snow.
We're down here, of course, on the Texas coast, where if it gets to be 68 degrees, we're bundling up. But if we have heavy totes at all, I don't know. But anyway, we're here to talk about Doctor Strangelove. Last week, of course, we had Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece of 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is a dark comedy, and it's in black and white, and we were talking right before we got on as to why uh, some films in the '60s were still in black and white up until around, well, this is 1964 when this came out, and I believe that its competitor also, which was
Hail safe.
Failsafe, was also in black and white, and what was the one we've reviewed before in Harm's Way was also in black and white all this year, and so I'm wondering just when we crossed the bar where virtually everything was in color.
One thing movie that comes to mind. This is 3 years later, but a film with, in some respects, it's a dark comedy, uh, and you don't usually hear it described that way, but it's got its comedic elements. Bonnie and Clyde is clearly in color. You think of
Yeah,
a dark satirical film, um, but right, this, I think you called it earlier. This is right at the turning point of going between black and white and color. If you were making a serious film like 12 Angry Men, you were going to make that in black and white. And it just, you could make something like 12 Angry Men in color. Of course, that was
but
7 years, like
the Music
57.
Man would be in color,
Yeah,
which is probably
exactly.
around this time. I don't remember
Right.
exactly when the Music Man came out on film, but this is probably close.
Sound of Music, 1965, got to be in
Yep,
color.
yep, yep.
And so yeah, this is right and on that turning point. And by 68, you could make a film that's making a statement, a serious film like The Graduate, which is also a funny film. It's a black comedy too, but but it could be in color because you had more control of the lighting and the film stock than you had in, say, 57, 58. And I think that idea that if you were making a serious film, it needed to be in black and white just kind of lingered for quite a while until the mid 60s.
Yeah. And in this case, this is a dark comedy. I think that it had to be in black and white the way that it's presented because everything is has an undertone of doom. And I
Right.
don't think that you'd want to make that a very colorful picture. Although there's something I read that Kubrick wanted the table in the war room to be green, so it would suggest a poker table, and yet it was filmed in black and white, so I don't know why he bothered.
Good point. I think maybe even the art director was like, had that. I'd seen that too. Why are we bothering to do this? But the idea that they were playing poker over the lives, with the lives of the entire world, that those were the stakes. Well,
Yeah,
just what an incredible idea. And
it's interesting they didn't take sides on this either. I mean, there were this the way that they treated the reaction to the possibility of a nuclear attack, which is what the whole plot is about. They really didn't take sides on this. They didn't say that the Russians were worse than we were, or that we were worse than the Russians.
that's out, a terrific point. That's exactly right. They did not take sides. The two sides back then, at least, you think one side would have been basically like Jack D. Ripper. And there were people, lots of people, that thought fluoridation was some sort of plot that wasn't just plucked out of nowhere.
Yes.
That was, there was the absolute fear of communism, that they were subversives, that they were everywhere. We think of the McCarthy era from 10 years prior as being kind of the penultimate of that, but it never went away. I mean, there were
No.
still a lot of people that felt that way. And
Well,
and
we
Jack
were
D.
in
Ripper,
school. We were in school, of course, during the Cold War, and there were the duck and cover exercises, and it was something that was there. I don't think that it worried any of us really, but it was something that was discussed all the time. That eventually that the Russians would attack us, or something would happen that would trigger a nuclear war, and they kind of soft pedaled the idea that nobody would live through it, but that was kind of the talk. There wasn't, it was the reason that they gave for Vietnam being what it was that if we don't fight that here, we're going to have to fight the Russians. That's going to be worse.
that was still at play in Vietnam. You're exactly right. That's, yeah, the domino theory. The dominoes come until finally they come to Australia, maybe in Vietnam. That's the domino. If the dominoes, if we don't stop the dominoes from falling, or they may end up here. You're right. That was completely, and that would have been more of the. I want to even say, well, right wing, far right side of things, especially the fluoridation. The John Birch Society of Fluoridation was not representative of the Republican Party. It was more of a far right view. I think the other side that was apparently just uh, really starting to get under Kubrick's skin as he did the research for this film was the idea that we could survive a nuclear war, that somehow that it was being presented as palatable, that perhaps if we had a nuclear war, we could maybe, and not that liberals were supporting tactical nukes at all, but there was an idea that in society, I think Life magazine showed the cover of Life was a well stocked, well made shelter, as if
Yeah.
you could make it through okay. And
Well,
yeah,
they kind of got away from that in the 60s and the 50s. They were talking about build your fallout shelter, but in the 60s they kind of backed off of it because they felt that would be um, an indication that we thought that we could survive one of these things, and this mutually assured destruction theory was important in order to keep the peace.
to keep the
and
peace,
uh, and
right?
so while there had been talks of using mines and things like this, and certainly we know now that there's an underground bunker under the White House and probably under the Capitol as well, in order to protect the higher government people. Also, this mountain getaway that they use to take one person of the cabinet whenever there's a joint session of Congress and all of the main government is there. They always take one person away in an undisclosed location, and it's been revealed later that there's a mountain bunker not far from the Capitol, which
Is it
they
West Virginia or
yeah, I believe so.
right?
And the Swiss apparently have the best set of fallout shelters anywhere. They can put the entire population underground and presumably survive a nuclear attack.
Leave it to that Swiss precision to make something. Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah,
But so I think the idea, and as you mentioned, the idea that mutual assured destruction, which in a sense, but the idea was if you take away the complete destruction from that, all of a sudden you're starting to deal with something that might be palatable, be okay. And I think the idea that you could have a nuclear war and it would somehow be survivable, or we could deal with this. Kubrick and a lot of scientists felt that it was nonsense. If you go down that path, you will complete. And they, at the end of the day, we now realize they were completely right. You go down that path, it will be complete destruction. Mutually
yeah,
assured destruction is mutually assured complete destruction, and that is a nightmare scenario. And I think he wanted to show this is a night, whether you're left wing or right wing, it's a nightmare scenario, almost like a third path at the time, just to say, wait a minute, this, you can't talk about this in any sane way.
yeah,
the A sane person would say this is crazy, and that's kind of, I think the politics of the film are, it's kind of like that. It's not left or right. It's just, this is crazy. And somewhere along the way, they decided to present it. It was going to be like Failsafe. The book that it's based on is a very serious book.
I think it's called
And
Red Alert.
right, right. And somewhere along the way, they realized, I think Kubrick and the screenwriter uh, would all of a sudden start. Well, I think they started laughing about somehow. Well, what would we eat? And then they all of a sudden, like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, they start laughing at it. And at some point, Kubrick realizes this has got to be a nightmare comedy, and they turned it into
Yeah.
from a serious film to a comedy, which just works so well.
And if you think about it, it was all kind of ridiculous anyway. The idea
Right.
of being able to survive a nuclear exchange, and so that's kind of where we start on this. So I think that in light of what they did, it's kind of interesting. So the plot of this is of a uh, unhinged uh, brigadier
Just a little
general,
funny in the head.
funny.
Yeah.
Jack D. Ripper, who decides that fluoridated water is going to be the end of all of us, and he is taking an opportunity on a regular exercise of his battle wing to go ahead and launch an attack, a backdoor attack. And that leads me to one of the best quotes in this entire picture. In the war room, the president says, General Turgidson, I find this very difficult to understand. I was under the impression I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons. Turgidson says, that's right, sir. You're the only person authorized to do so. And although I hate to judge before all the facts are in, it's beginning to look like General Ripper exceeded his authority. I love that line.
Understatement.
I love that line.
So yeah, the lunacy of the understatement, and that whole idea of understatement, kind of trying to put a cover of sanity on top of complete madness, just flows through the war room scenes when the
But
president
it's how
calls them.
government talks. They always say, "Oh, there's been an incident," and when everything is caught fire and going
Yeah,
in your proverbial handbasket, and they say, we think that there's some things that didn't go to plan.
there's been an incident at Praxis. Is it what? No, what's the name? The Klingon moon that blows up.
Yeah, it
They
was
call that.
Praxis. Yeah,
Right, yeah, they call that an incident. Exactly. So,
yeah.
yep. So,
But
yeah,
let's talk a little bit about the casting on this. George C. Scott plays General Buck Turgidson. He is the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in this picture, and it was something I've always heard, that he did not know that the film was a comedy and was upset after it came out that they took what he had played straight and became a comedy. He obviously knew it was a comedy. He knew what the characters' names were. The problem that he had with Kubrick was that Kubrick wanted him to overact, and he really wanted to play it straight because he thought it would be funnier if he played it straight. And Kubrick forced him to go over the top. And Turgidson, of course, is over the top with the B-52 and all that kind of stuff that he did. Standing on the table, taking the chewing gum, and standing on the chair and attacking the Russian. I mean, all that kind of stuff was very over the top, and he thought it was unnecessary. But Kubrick forced him to do that, and he said he'd never work with Kubrick again. Although in hindsight, he said that it was probably the best movie he'd ever made, and it certainly made a big influence on his future career.
there's some Turgidson in Patton. There's
Yes,
Patton doesn't go all the way over the top like that, but you can see those elements there. And
yes.
who would he have got the part without of Patton without being Turgidson? I don't, but he's perfect. And you are so right about that too, because you look at the types of comedy traditionally, to make people laugh, sometimes you don't want to say, hey, this is funny. You want to play it understated, and then let the elements speak for themselves and not
Right.
act over the top. But in this case, Kubrick was spot on right. I think he
with this
needed to be
character with
with
this
this
character
character.
he had to underplay Peter Sellers, who played President Muffley, and the original shots they had, they wanted Merkin Muffley, the president, to be a bit effeminate, and Sellers overplayed that. And they decided that he needed to be the sane person among the crazies. And so they had him pull that back considerably. And so, and that's why I don't think anybody recognized Peter Sellers as being the president in this. He looked so much different than his usual self, and played it so straight when he was such a genius at comedy. This was an
Oh,
unusual step for him, and probably the smallest amount of screen time used on him was as Muffley.
that's oh, the names are so good. But he's playing Adlai Stevenson, which
Yeah.
is just amazing. Even though, like you mentioned, the all of these at the beginning of the film, we get the credits that say that they're the people in this film I have no connections to people who are living, and that is completely untrue.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing. I think they even suggested Adlai Stevenson too. This was the idea, and that was another little political thing. The idea now, the say I'm trying the Adeline Stevenson wing of the Democratic Party, I'll put it that way,
Okay.
was and actually that was fairly close connection when you think about it. That was kind of Eisenhower's America, very pragmatic, very pragmatic, gonna do things that make sense, do things that are good for business, a very sane kind of I mean, we realize later with the civil rights, all of a sudden our society realizes that we've got some big problems roiling under the surface that we're not addressing, but
Yeah.
still on the surface, kind of a pragmatic, practical, try to be a humane country and create a new type of Europe. And so that's the kind of character, very common sense, reasonable character that that Sellers is playing as a president. But that was another critique that I think that Kubrick was launching, was that in some respects, although you can admire somebody like this, he's the only sane person in the room, as one of our colleagues used to call himself, the only sane person in the room,
Yes.
Doc. But
Yeah. No one would have expected Doc to be sane at any point, but yeah, during those meetings he was. Uh,
yeah, that's exactly
inside
right.
joke. I'm sorry, but that just happens. Um, he was
But
he
yeah,
was
Kubrick
he
wanted
was
to
very much Peter Sellers every other time except in those meetings. Anyway,
right.
Peter Sellers, of course, plays three parts. Kubrick quipped sometime later that there were he got three actors essentially for the cost of six.
Six.
Yeah, it was it cost $1.9 million to make the film, and we think nearly $1 million went to Sellers himself. So he made a very good deal on that film, and really he shines, and of course Doctor Strangelove gets even less time than Muffley did, but all of that stuff was ad libbed.
Oh, that was ad libbed.
Yes,
Incredible. And with the hand and everything. Did he
yeah,
that
yeah.
that is
Some people think
incredible.
that that was taken from the sheriffs in Frankenstein who had the prosthetic hand,
Right. Right.
and they made fun of that, of course, in Mel Brooks' Frankenstein, but Young Frankenstein, but Peter Sellers had this. There is an actual uh, medical condition where you can have body parts that don't listen to your brain. There's a name
Fascinating.
for it. I cannot remember it, but for some reason, he didn't quite have control of his right hand, and every once in a while, it would go into a Nazi salute, which he was the next Nazi. The glove that he wore actually was one of Kubrick's gloves. Kubrick had a pair of gloves that he used to adjust lights with so he wouldn't burn his hands. And Sellers said, I want to borrow one of those. And he put it on the unmanageable hand of Strangelove, just that hand. and used it to do the film. So that was something that was just made up on the spot. And I suspect that some of Lionel Mandrake's stuff was also ad lib. There was certainly uh, a number of places there where he could have played along with the written word. It didn't follow anybody else's narrative, I think. But
How
of
do you
course,
just how
Peter
do you
Sellers was
not
just great in this.
how do you not crack up on set? You've got 20 some odd guys standing around the war room, and how do you not crack up with Peter Sellers?
That was the problem. That was the problem. They say that they were able to cut back and forth to try to keep seeing the reaction of the other actors on the set, and of course the crew laughing. Peter Bull, who played the Russian ambassador, I forget what his name was. Um,
Oh, he was great.
yeah. At any rate, he was. There is one shot where you can see him trying to retain his composure at antics of Peter Sellers on this. And in fact, that was the reason the pie fight didn't happen at the end. That's
It's,
another thing I've heard about this film for a long time, that there was a pie fight at the end, but they had to cut it because Kennedy had been assassinated, and one pie hits the president and he falls, and Turgidson goes and says he's struck down in the prime of his life, which was too close. That really wasn't the reason. The reason was during the pie fight, Sellers is basically falls out of his wheelchair and manages to crawl to the wall and is not involved in any of the pie fight. And people were were laughing so hard at the pie fight while they were doing it, they couldn't use any of it, even if it did have that last part in it.
that's incredible that I had heard the first thing that you said, that when you said like senior officer down, president, hit by the pie, that was too close to the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
And apparently there's a reference to Dallas when they're in the plane, and they changed
Yeah.
it maybe to Vegas.
They changed to Vegas, although, because you could see him pronounce the D, some people thought that he said Dagus. That was Slim Pickens
wherever
there.
that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
The ambassador's name, all the names have such good meaning. The ambassador's name is Alexei D. Sadesky.
Right.
Yeah. and for like Merklin Muffley, the president of the United States, kind of going for the idea that he's well reasoned, probably well intentioned, but the idea is he's ineffectual. And
Yeah.
And that was, I think that was Kubrick's view of this. And again, I don't think Stevenson was trying to say we can fight a winnable war, or that even we would survive it. But there was that kind of idea of staying sane. And I think Kubrick also just wanted to say this whole thing, left, right, center, it's insane. And
Yes.
this just sheer insanity of nuclear war. The Sadisky, I was checking the name, Buck Turgidson. That has so many connotations. Dr. Strangelove, of course.
Yeah.
Alien hand syndrome. There's
Okay.
probably
That's
a
it.
better. Say that again.
That's what it's commonly called. I couldn't think of that either. Yeah.
And James Earl Jones is perfect in his role too.
Yeah. This was his first movie role, and
wow.
That of course propelled him into a much bigger career after this, as well as Slim Pickens. Slim Pickens he played second and third parts in cowboy films, and in fact, James Earl Jones thought that he was a method actor because he came in dressed basically as Colonel Kong, and that was just the way he dressed all the time. He was always in the hat and the cowboy outfit. That was just how he dressed, and that's how he talked. So,
and apparently Sterling Hayden had been retired, which I didn't realize.
Yeah, they brought him out of retirement. He had been actually a member of the Communist Party for a time, despite the fact that he plays this big anti-communist. And he'd also been part of military intelligence during World War II. He did some part of
That's
the underground
fascinating.
stuff that they did with the Italians, especially. And so he was. It
Was he
was.
semi blacklisted?
I don't know. I don't think he was.
Gotcha, gotcha. That, but apparently had
He had
retired.
other problems. He was an alcoholic, and I think that there was some either before or after this film there was some problems with what he called the bloody bottle. But
He does the bloody bottle. He does appear in a film playing. It's like you if you can imagine it, let's imagine that somehow there's a happier ending and the world doesn't go come to the end. What would happen to Jack the Ripper? Well, he would retire to a ranch in Wyoming and have fences because he's remembering when his base was attacked, successfully attacked by that airborne unit,
yeah,
and uh, and think, okay, in retirement, what am I going to do? And so he sets up this ranch with explosives all over the place and a tank or two. And he plays that role in a film 15 years later called Winter Kills.
yeah,
They don't. His name is not Jack the Ripper, but it's as if Jack the Ripper had retired. It is an amazing film. It's written by the guy that wrote The Manchurian Candidate,
yeah,
and which just kind of it seems like when you think like with the article we talked about that connects the Manchurian Candidate and this film and Planet of the Apes as political statement films, really important kind of turning point films in the mid '60s. And I always kind of put the Manchurian Candidate with this film. Talk about some great films coming out though in
yeah,
those years.
yeah,
Failsafe, this film, Manchurian Candidate. And of course all of them kind of affected by the Kennedy assassination too.
yeah. Now, of course, Kennedy was assassinated uh, after this film was almost finished, and so they had to make a couple of quick changes, like the dubbing over with Slim Pickens' line. And this is a whole line, by the way. I just found it.
Ah,
Survival kit contains, let's see, survival kit contents check. In them, you'll find one 45 caliber automatic, 2 boxes of ammunition, 4 days concentrated emergency rations, one drug issue containing antibiotics, morphine, vitamin pills, pep pills, sleeping pills, tranquilizer pills, one miniature combination Russian phrase book and Bible, $100 in rubles, $100 in gold, 9 packs of chewing gum, one issue of prophylactics, 3 lipsticks, 3 pairs of nylon stockings. Shoot, a fella can have a pretty good weekend in Vegas with all that stuff.
and and that
That's
shot of
great.
the Bible is the size of a postage stamp, and
Yes.
James Earl Jones is holding it and just looking like, oh, yeah, it's supposed
Yeah.
to be a Bible entry. That's that
But
the
that became
Slim
kind of a
Pickens.
signature of Slim Pickens, his emphatic listing out of things. They used that again in 1941.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, he was uh, the problem in 1941 was a Japanese submarine off the Pacific had a broken compass, and they get Slim Pickens off a boat somewhere and
Right.
try to pull him into the submarine, and he's got a radio with him that won't fit in the submarine, and one of the Japanese officers says we have to figure out a way to make this smaller, which was a pun. And then they make him empty his pockets, and he is naming out all of what he's had in his pockets the same way that he did this line here. So that
That
kind of
is
that's a
that
connection there.
apparently that is I will I have not seen 1941. That is a lack on my part. And it got panned at the time, but it's kind of getting a reappraisal as we look back on it. I think there's a reappraisal of that, and that's fascinating that
Yeah,
connection there.
but
The
there are better
well,
lines. There are better lines that Major Kong had. This one, well, boys, we got 3 engines out. We got more holes in us than a horse trader's mule. The radio's gone and we're leaking fuel. And if we was flying any lower, why we'd need sleigh bells on this thing. But we got one little budge on them Ruskies. At this height, they may harpoon us, but they dang sure ain't gonna spot us on no radar screen.
what with those lines, which come straight out of World War II,
Yeah.
like flying a B-17 that low, or the kit, the survival kit.
Yeah.
There's a writer named Charles Malland wrote it's an article from a little bit I think probably mid 90s,
Yeah.
but a book called Hollywood's America, and he said that that is representative of, again, the outdated version. This is not the Cold War slash nuclear war, in looking at it like a World War II event, like the way Major Kong is doing with the survival kit.
Yes.
It's just it's insane. It's not the same thing. Like, what kind of, you're thinking in the back of their mind, okay, once they nuke Russia, what? And then, of course, they don't know that the failsafe, that the doomsday machine is going to go off. But still, what kind of world are you going to have? You're not going to have a world where you're going to be thinking about linen, nylon stockings or prophylactics, or chewing gum. When you crash land after that, there's going to be nothing. And I think there were, again, a brilliant job of Kubrick in so many ways, trying to show that our way of thinking is the current, quote, reasonable way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no sanity in the madness of nuclear war. There's no
Well, when
sane
they
place.
first, they do have him in. It's another great line that that Slim Pickens has when they indicate what Plan R is.
Ah,
He
right.
says, "Well, I've been to one World's Fair, a picnic, a rodeo, and that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Come over a set of earphones. You sure you got today's codes?"
That's a good point, because it's going to be Plan R, which means radio silence. They can't be called back. The idea that the Plan R in the movie, and then of course that's what General Jack D. Ripper initiated, was the way to get his planes out there, and they can't turn back. If there was going to be a way for somebody, and apparently that Kubrick did his homework, because there probably was a Plan R. They definitely, they were thinking about contingency plans.
Yeah.
What if, yeah,
Well, there were some congressional investigations as to whether something like Dr. Strangelove could actually happen if there is a Jack D. Ripper somewhere in the American
right,
military or in the
right,
Russian military, for that matter,
for
and
the
that's something that was taken fairly seriously later.
and
Okay, so we've talked Slim Pickens, we've talked James Earl Jones, George C. Scott. Let's now go to Sterling Hayden, who was Jack D. Ripper. Originally, they thought Gene Kelly for his
ah,
part.
ooh, no, there's no dancing in the war room. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's and of course he wouldn't have been in the war room, but no, Gene Kelly, great actor. I love the guy, but I just don't see that myself. That's
yeah. I'm kind of glad that they ended up with Sterling Hayden. I think that he played it just um, he played it straight enough to where you thought that he really was not all there. Kind of funny,
right, right.
funny.
Played it beautifully. Oh,
Yeah,
bodily
he did.
fluids, essence of bodily liquids, just yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, it gave Peter Sellers, which his biggest part was as Lionel Mandrake, and he's the chief of staff under this general, traded from the Brits, and this was supposedly the idea that ever since World War II, Britain, who used to be the world power, has become kind of a second into us,
Right.
and so they do this very graphically, where Mandrake is someone that can do nothing against this crazy general except just kind of nod and smile where he could.
That's such a good point in placing it in the entire British context, because you always think of Stanley Kubrick as British. He's not, but having that British sensibility as becoming, we can't be a great power, but what we'll be is a mentor to,
Yeah,
a mentor to the great powers, which of course is what Mandrake is kind, in some respects, is kind of doing. And he mentions that he flew. I think this is actually a Hurricane, but he mentions Mandrake mentions he flew a Spitfire in the film.
yeah, yeah. It's
In
P-51, I think, and they had their wings were drawn back a little bit more. But
right.
yeah, it looked very much like that. So yeah,
To
but
that scene you
there's
talked
some
about. You mentioned another great line too. Before we started the show, was the torture. Was Jack D. Ritter mentions he for some reason he goes off. Were you tortured, Mandrake? And there's and then Mandrake
yes.
mentions that he was tortured by the Japanese. And
I'm
I think
pulling that up now. So yeah,
gotcha. It kind of and oh you and the funny thing is while you're pulling that up, I was you get Mandrake. He's so uncomfortable, in that role. He's no longer
yes,
a mentor. Instead, he's having to try to talk to a crazy man. Jack D. Ripper even grabs him in the couch and talks to him. Have you got it yet? The
not yet. Working
Not
on it.
yet. Yeah, grabs him in the couch, talks to him, and but the funny thing is, Mandrake then transforms once Jack the Ripper commits suicide. Boy, Mandrake, when he's talking to another character actor, Keenan Wynn does a great job. One part as the commander of the force that took over the base that wins the battle.
Yeah,
He's terrific, and of course, he does not want to attack a Coca-Cola machine.
that's true.
That's private
Well,
property.
yeah, it was Colonel Bat Guano, or if you translate that to English, it means that he was nuts. But here's the exchange between General Ripper and Mandrake. Were you ever a prisoner of war? Well, yes, I was. Matter of fact, Jack, I was. Did they torture you? Yes, they did. I was tortured by the Japanese. Jack, if you must know, not a pretty story. Well, what happened? Oh, well, I don't know, Jack. Difficult to think under these conditions, but well, what happened was they got me in the old Rangoon Ishinawa Railway. I was laying train lines for the bloody Japanese puff puffs. No, I mean when they tortured you, did you talk? Uh, oh no. Well, I don't think they wanted me to talk really. I don't think they wanted me to say anything. It was just their way of having a bit of fun, the swines. Strange thing they make such bloody good cameras.
Film is all over the place. And Kubrick was a photographer and probably used some of their bloody good cameras. That's but just so many the details in it. One thing, too, that with Mandrake, Peter Sellers playing Mandrake, um, that I had not realized, and you have listened to some of the shows that Peter Sellers goes back in the early 50s. He does radio in Britain
Yeah,
and apparently did it with I can't remember exactly who, but did radio with some of the Monty Python troupe.
yeah. Well, he was up until a year before this film came out with uh, the Goon Show, which predated Monty Python, The Goodies. Oh, there was another that now I can't think of, but
Something about saying a
Beyond the
line
Fringe,
on radio or
Beyond the Fringe, which was a stage show, which he probably I don't remember who was in Beyond the Fringe, but I think he was there, and so was John Cleese, and Eric Idle wrote a lot of the stuff that was done during those times, so that they all knew each other.
that is fascinating because for me, and I always think of just as Monty Python being all those guys, their first thing ever to do. I forget that their prehistory, the Monty Python prehistory, and it involves working with Peter Sellers, which is just incredible. That opens the door to a whole bunch of new programs. I wonder if you can. Hopefully, the BBC didn't erase those tapes. Hopefully, some of that stuff is still around where you can listen to those programs because I bet they're great.
They were part of the BBC transcription service, and they were distributed to stations around the world. And they were instructed to destroy the records after a certain period of time, which I'm here to tell you did not happen,
Thank God.
at least in one place. So
Why would the BBC? Yeah, yeah. But I know they got rid of Doctor Who. They erased some Doctor Who episodes back in the day.
well, there was a lot in American television as well, where a lot of programs that were videotaped uh,
Yeah,
before like 1970 were thrown out just because they needed the space to store them.
Right.
And it saved them a penny, but that was the way they thought at the time, and the BBC did the same thing.
Did the same
So,
thing. Yeah.
but a lot of stuff has been saved. We found that there have been, in the hands of individuals, a lot of stuff that's been recovered.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Because this has made me, I mean, was this one, I know apparently Peter Sellers worked with Stanley Kubrick on Lolita before this film. And,
Yes.
but I think, as you mentioned, Professor B, that prior to that, it was more radio, television, BBC shows, as opposed to films that,
Yes.
yeah, and that this really launched his film career. And
This launched the career of a number of people, as we've said, with not the least of which was George C. Scott and Slim
exactly,
Pickens and uh, uh, just about everybody else that was in it. I mean,
Keenan Wynn,
there's
even I'm not sure. Yeah, James Earl Jones absolutely gets him
yeah.
going. Yeah,
Yeah, Keenan
really.
Wynn, Ed Wynn, of course, was a big star. His father was a big star from vaudeville days and was one of the
Ah,
first people that had a radio show in this country. He was scared to death, by the way. And
ah,
his son, Keenan Wynn, was just coming of age in this point. And so he was in this, he was in Mary Poppins, he was in um, the Great Race. You remember, with Tony Curtis? He
absolutely.
was in everything up until, I think, he was in Dallas, the early
Ah,
miniseries of Dallas.
right.
So the Keenan Wynn made a very long and fruitful career, but certainly this was probably one of his first films.
Yeah, yeah, and and a great part. Just one scene, but a fantastic part. So many comments on American society
And of course,
the
James Earl
critique.
Jones. Don't forget James Earl Jones. This was
Absolutely.
his first film, and made enough of an impact that boosted his career as well.
In the documentary that one of the docs that goes with this, James Earl Jones discusses he was worried. Apparently he had a few more lines, but at least they were not all cut, because James Earl Jones has he's got it's a small line, but they talk about is this order real, this command R, is it a real thing, or are they just testing us to see, will we follow through with this thing?
Uh,
uh, and it adds a little dimension to his character. And I really love the way that Kubrick really found a way, and apparently the even the Air Force was very concerned. They were not going to cooperate at all, but they were very concerned that Kubrick had gotten inside a B-52 because everything looked just right.
yeah, basically, the art director had gotten a copy of a British aviation magazine and did it all from a single photograph.
One photograph and extrapolated, and the amazing thing, so many things extrapolated, like the ways you send the way you send codes to determine, is this nuclear attack real, what is today's codes, and those letters go by, and all the safety checkpoints on,
Well,
all the
that's not the only
redundant.
thing that they did that
Yeah.
for. In radio, every station was given a red folder, and in the
Ah,
red folder would be today's codes. If the emergency broadcast system test was a real emergency, they would transmit it was a 4-letter code, I believe, for that.
oh, but I wonder how long we kept doing that. How was
Up
that?
until it was replaced with the emergency alert system, and that was about I don't know, 20 years ago.
Wow. So we had, even in the at for example, in the NPR station where you have been associated with, did they have some of those? Was that being used in the 80s?
Oh
Some of
yeah,
the
oh yeah.
oh my, and so every day
They
they'd be
once a month they would send a new booklet of codes,
30
and
days worth of codes.
it had to be um, close at hand to the emergency broadcast system receiver.
That is
But
amazing. Ah, that is, well, one you mentioned close at hand reminded me of a system. This is a little bit sideways, but we think about, was there anything like the doomsday device that the Russians invent. We didn't, in this film, we did not have a doomsday device, but which would be a device in case your side is losing in the war and all is lost. Would you want to activate the rest of your weapons so that everybody, doomsday, so that everybody goes down? The Russians actually had a system like that, and Gorbachev put an end to it. But the system was called the dead hand because the idea was,
Yeah.
if your command and control is lost, you don't have anybody that's going to flip the switch to activate the rest of your nukes to destroy the rest of the world in a completely doomsday scenario. They developed it, and it was, and the actual doomsday device would, I forget what would have been in the movie. They talk about computers that would take it. The computers would realize that the scenario has hit, enough radiation has hit, and the computers themselves, because everybody, there would be a dead hand. All the commanders would be dead, and the computers would activate the doomsday device. They had a similar thing with the Russians. What it did was it launched, I want to say, an unmanned. It was a missile that would go across, like a cruise missile that would go across Russian. It was planned to go across Russian bases, over Russian bases. Nobody's in the cruise missile. Remember, everybody's dead. So the cruise missile goes across the Russian bases and has codes in it that automatically activate the ICBMs so that they will fire because there's nobody around to fire them. It was a true doomsday machine that they
Amazing.
had developed in the mid 80s. I want to say that the characters, after Brezhnev and prior to Gorbachev, those the two premieres, it was in that time that they developed the idea of the doomsday machine. They called it the dead hand.
Yeah. What's interesting in related to this, the Russian ambassador mentions that uh, they developed the doomsday machine because it was cheaper, and that because in keeping up with the uh, missile gap and the peace gap and various gaps, that it was ruining their economy. And it turns out that this actually came to be uh, in their preparing for Star Wars. That is to say, the Strategic
Ah,
Defense Initiative, which
right.
interestingly we found out in later years never worked. And yet they were spending so much money to try to defend themselves against that idea that it led to the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right, that's a good point. It really, yeah, the Star Wars was the ultimate, that messes up with their economy. And in the context of that, right, they developed this dead hand technology, which is, and of course, I love the line that that Peter Sellers, in this case, is Doctor Strangelove mentions, you cannot keep this a secret. If this is going to work, you you must announce that you have a doomsday machine as a
Yes,
deterrent. And of course,
yes,
the ambassador says, well, the premier, he loves surprises, and he was going to announce it at the party congress on Monday. So that which reminds me of another. There was some another film that maybe one of our viewers will. There was some announcement. We're going to announce it on Tuesday. On a That might have been a Star Trek film. They were going to put the word out that they had this on Tuesday, but I can't remember what it was.
yeah,
But a similar line, they were going to announce it on Monday.
yeah. It was going to be at the party congress on Monday. Love
On
surprises.
Monday,
Yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah.
it. Oh,
I like this one in Muffley's telephone conversation with the unseen Russian premier Dmitry. Um, he says, "Listen, it's not going to help either one of us if a doomsday machine goes off now, is it?" Well, Dmitry, there's no point in you getting hysterical at a moment like this.
exactly, which is yeah, totally different character than Buck Turgidson. He's moderate, he's underselling it. One of our generals went a little funny in the head, and we've got a
You
little
know,
problem.
funny.
Yeah.
It was great in its pacing.
Say that again.
It was great in its pacing in that
Oh,
during the phone
yes.
conversation, it's only the president that you hear speaking, but his pauses there to suggest the response of Dmitri.
Oh, and when Dmitri is talking to the ambassador about the Doomsday Machine, they're speaking Russian, but you know it's bad. And only the only you can and not only are they speaking Russian, the only person you can hear speaking is the ambassador. And so the president says, and the minute you just hear the ambassador's tone, the pacing is perfect, and you see the president, what's the matter, Dmitri? And and it's because the ambassador knows that the Doomsday Machine has gone active. And I remembered what was going to happen in Tuesday. It is Star Trek. It's Star Trek Generations,
Yeah.
and it's when they're on the big old Excelsior, and basically they've in Generations, which is the first movie with the Trek movie with Captain Picard. Yet it's also got the crossover one with Kirk, and Kirk is they're in Kirk's time, and they're out there on the Excelsior, and basically the Excelsior's on a training run, but they run into the Nexus, and there's all sorts of scary stuff happening. And Kirk is saying, "Well, what about photon torpedoes? We could." And the guy and the captain says, "Well, that's coming on Tuesday." And there were plenty of things that they were,
Yeah.
but they picked a Tuesday instead of a Monday. But
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the lines on the phone call.
ah,
The ambassador says, "Be careful, Mr. President. I think he's drunk."
right.
Hello, hello, Dimitri. Listen, I can't hear too well. Do you suppose you could turn the music down a little? That's kind of an inside joke, I think, for the anybody that had visited the Soviet Union during the Cold War, is that they would turn their music way up so that listening devices couldn't eavesdrop on them. Um, oh, that's much better. Yeah, huh? Yes, fine, fine. I can hear you now, Dimitri. Clear and plain and coming through fine. I'm coming through fine too, eh? Oh, good then. Well, then, as you say, we're both coming through fine. Good. I believe a lot of this was ad libbed. Uh, well, then, it's good that you're fine and I'm fine. I agree with you. It's great to be fine. Now then, Dimitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with a bomb. The bomb, Dimitri, the hydrogen bomb. Well, now, what happened is one of our base commanders, he had sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dimitri. Let me finish, Dimitri. Well, listen, how do you think I feel about it? Can you imagine how I feel about it, Dimitri? I'm just calling up to tell you something terrible has happened. It's a friendly call. Of course, it's a friendly call. Listen, if it wasn't friendly, you probably wouldn't have gotten it. They will not reach their targets for at least another hour. I'm positive, Dimitri. Listen, I've been all over this with your ambassador. It's not a trick. Well, I'll tell you. And it goes on like this. And I have a feeling that he had lived a whole lot of that.
I have a feeling you're exactly right, and it's brilliant. Just listening to you give the lines again, it puts you right there, and it's one of those conversations in a film where you're watching somebody um, speak out of film. And what's interesting too is this film. Whereas we just did 2001, which is it's told visually. We've got gaps of 25 minutes of no dialogue in 2001,
Yeah,
but this film is a
full of it.
radio person's delight. This
Yeah,
film is told through dialogue and verbally, and I just you can imagine I have a feeling everybody has in their mind's eye what Dmitry looks like. Yeah, Dmitry Kissoff. And we
yeah,
know in our mind's eye, we can see him at that party. We can see him turn down the music. We can see who he is. I have a feeling he's bald, looks a little bit like Khrushchev in my mind's eye.
probably. Yeah,
And you can just see the entire, and to think that Sellers did that ad lib is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He's not talking to anybody. He's just he's going on. Yeah, and in plenty of movies, they would have had a real phone and somebody feeding the actor or interacting with the actor. I'm sure there's nothing on the other end of the line. It's just Sellers in his own mind creating this conversation that
Yeah.
is. And I'm
I
more worried than you're worried because you can't one up me in being concerned
yeah.
about.
I'm sorry too, Dimitri. Can't we both be sorry? Yeah, it
Yeah,
goes
I'm
on.
more sorry.
Yeah. All right, we're both sorry. We could say that we're both sorry.
Just brilliant. Just in
Another
so many.
place, another place I love is Turgidson. He is reading the letter from Ripper, and he at the end of it he says, "My boys will give you the best kind of start, 1,400 megatons worth, and you sure as hell won't stop them now. So let's get going. There's no other choice. God willing, we will prevail in peace and freedom from fear and in true health through the purity and essence of our natural fluids. God bless you all." And he hung up. We're still trying to figure out the meaning of that last phrase, sir. And the president says, "There's nothing to figure out." There's nothing to figure out, General Jurgensen. This man is obviously psychotic. And he says, "Well, I'd like to hold off judgment on a thing like that, sir, until all the facts are in. General Jurgensen, when you instituted the human reliability test, you assured me there was no possibility of such a thing ever occurring. Well, I don't think it's quite fair to condemn a whole program because of a single slip up, sir.
A little slip up. Yeah,
Just single
one
slip
gets
up.
through.
Just one thing. I mean,
And of course that would be yeah, Turgidson is a little bit patterned after Curtis LeMay,
yeah,
and who had a fascinating history. He worked with Defense Secretary McNamara. One thing that they did was they did not, you think of the atomic bomb, but they did the firebombing of Tokyo, which was which was in some respects, you think about the atomic bomb, and you can really, or you can see the argument for the initial use of the atomic bomb, in that how many casualties it would have. The argument has been how many casualties that atomic bomb prevented in the taking over, in the land assault we would have used in Japan. But before that, we were firebombing Tokyo, and literally we knew exactly what we're doing. Homes made of wood and paper. How do you create a firestorm tornado? And I think 100,000 people may have been killed in one night. And LeMay and McNamara were involved in that. And of course,
yeah,
LeMay, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I think he was advocating an attack on Cuba, instead of just a blockade, just full blown attack on Cuba. One thing McNamara points out in a documentary that's associated with this film, they interviewed McNamara about 2003 when they were making this documentary for the
yeah,
film. And so they asked him, how close did we come? And he said the two biggest events were to using nukes, which he thought were absolutely crazy. And of course, in 2003, McNamara is 40 years removed from these events. And looking back, he realizes these times were crazy. And he said that basically when LeMay wanted to go after Cuba with a ground assault, to get rid of the Russian missiles, the CIA had told them that the Russians did not have any nuclear. They had launchers, but no nuclear weapons in Cuba. The truth is, they actually did have nuclear weapons, and that could have been a nuclear war at that point. So I mean, it is. You just go. It was a hair trigger time when this film was made. It unbelievably scary,
yeah.
and yeah, and the idea of mutual assured destruction. How do you feel on that? I did that help us get through at the end of the day? Mutual assured destruction.
Well, it was a theory that was as good as anything else. If
Yeah.
the if you have rational people on both sides, no one would want to do something that would cause that many people to die. And they talk about that here, where Turgidson says to the president, well, I'm not saying we won't get our hair messed up, but 20, 30 million people tops. And the idea of losing millions of people in a war is just something. I mean, we've all of our wars combined would not go to Turgidson's even small estimates of how many people would be lost. So I think it worked pretty well. Really, it held the peace for a long time,
and it was not a going and yeah, using tactical nukes is just not sane. And in a sense, that's what Turgidson was. It's a different way of arguing it, but going after the Russians, he was like, well, we got this attack underway, we might as just well
yeah,
finish it off. And then the president says, well, how many will get through? For one thing, the president morally felt it was horrible. You've got to call off this attack. But Turgidson saying, no, you could let it go through, and our losses, you're right, we'll get our hair messed up a little bit, but but yeah, it's just unthinkable, the amount of losses, and just what world, unthinkable on so many levels. Uh,
yeah,
wow, what a film! Just
it
the
really was.
another set was the War Room, was incredible. That's one of the
Yeah,
best sets. That apparently they used 10 miles of electrical wiring. Um, if you lay out the electrical
yeah,
wiring out
and they
for all those
melted the
lights.
map with some of the lighting that they had in there. They had to do special air conditioning to keep it from melting the transparency that the
Oh
lights are
my
shining through.
goodness!
But how ridiculous was it? The table was 20 feet in diameter. So in a real room, you wouldn't be able to hear anybody across the table from yourself.
Especially
And
me. Yeah,
talk about
that's
all the talk about all the wasted space. They say that a U-shaped table probably would have worked, and also about a third of the people had their backs to the big board. So
right. That's right. The big board. That was another thing. Every time we plan out our semester classes and we put it on a video projector, the same person in the room that we were talking about in our department, Doc, you love the idea of the big board.
yes,
But the big board was just fantastic. And then of course the office, where you're right, the other set was the office of of Turgidson, General Turgidson, with his golf clubs. He put like a machine gun, his heavy duty
yeah,
machine gun in his
yeah.
store set.
You're thinking of not Turgidson, but
Oh,
Ripper.
Jack the Ripper,
Yeah,
right? His
they
office.
actually used three different sound stages to do this film. One of the
Whoa,
sound stages was just the war room. The other one was Ripper's office, and the third was with Turgidson's apartment and the
right.
inside of the B-52. So it
Oh,
was a huge production. Usually, you use only one sound stage to build all the sets, but they had some huge sets, and especially the war room set. When Ronald Reagan became president, he asked his new aides to show him the war room. They said, we don't have one. So they do have a situation room in the basement of the White House, but it's a small conference room. It's not anything near.
it's not
And
like the
we've seen pictures of it since with the one where Obama and Hillary and others are watching the abduction
That's
of Osama bin Laden, and it's a cramped little room. So
cramped little room. Yeah, that's amazing. In my head, there's got to be a war room, but
yeah,
I think
there ought to
Failsafe
be.
had a war room
Yeah,
too. But oh, the best one of all is Doctor Strangelove. Just
the big board.
what about the music? No original. Feels like I did not research the music, but it feels like there's
No,
no.
there was no music in most of it except in the battle run of the B-52. That was when Johnny Comes Marching Home,
Right.
and then there was I was looking for that as a matter of fact. Um, there was music briefly in Burleson Air Force Base where the Peter Sellers discovers Mandrake discovers a radio playing and realizes if it was real Russian attack happening that there wouldn't be music on the radio.
And
And then, of course, there was We'll Meet Again, which was
ah,
over the last scene. Now, what's
oh,
interesting, and I can't find the exact reference on it because it's sliding away from me, but uh, the BBC um, had a special service for people who would be in bomb shelters during a nuclear attack, and on their playlist was "We'll Meet Again,"
ah,
and
interesting.
and it's something that the
To cheer
Queen,
people up. Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth, mentioned in a speech during the AIDS crisis, not the AIDS crisis, the COVID crisis,
Ah,
and in the speech, you know, we'll be with our families again. We will meet again.
right.
And it was obviously a it was a popular song during World War II, and a lot of her life was spent during World War II. But
Sure.
she
It's
knew about that.
uplifting.
She
Yeah.
knew about that specific piece being used on the BBC underground service that they had set up, which we will meet again.
And it's bitter irony. Instead of somewhat uplifting, hopeful, it's bitter irony because that's what you see so many nuclear explosions going off, stock footage at the end when the doomsday machine does go off. It's unbelievable. And then that music is just and then this is one of those movies where I thought you might have a cast at the end, a listing of the cast. It just says the end,
Yeah,
and you walk out of the theater just agape. You just
pretty much, and I mean, but other than that, it was called the BBC Wartime Broadcasting Service. They
ah
provided public information and morale boosting broadcasts for 100 days after a nuclear attack. And a recording of "We'll Meet Again" was included in the package of music that
was
went with that.
included. Wow. You
So
know,
that was
one
the thing
thing
there.
else.
It was suggested by Spike Mulligan, by the way, Peter Sellers' cohort on the Goon Show, to use that piece. He knew about that too, and that was why they used that. But otherwise, other than when Johnny Comes Marching Home and We'll Meet Again, I don't think they used any other music in the film at all. There was no incidental music.
Oh, and the Johnny comes marching home is so. Every time you cut to the plane, there's and the footage of the apparently they shot for 3 weeks. It looked like they were shooting maybe even in an old B-17, maybe, but the
Yeah,
film
it
crew,
was
the
in a
B
B
unit crew,
17 because the shadows were a B-17. They were flying actually over Greenland in order
right,
to
to get the stock footage.
get the stock
The
footage, and
Yeah,
were actually forced down because they accidentally photographed a secret American base in Greenland,
right.
and they were forced down and had to prove that they weren't Russian spies.
That's exactly right. But the use of that just brilliant. I mean, you can now looking at it, you can I mean, it's to me it still holds up. I love the models they made for the B-52. The rear projection, it works beautifully. But also the when you're looking out the windows, the perspectives are all when you're inside the plane and we can see out the windows above the navigator, above the pilot, the bombardier, you can see these different views, just beautifully done, and absolutely, they it wasn't just random photography they got of the Arctic. It was just terrific photography that they got, and apparently it was freezing cold. And you're right, they got forced down. Just amazing. And I thought the base in the attack was stock footage, and it's not. They actually filmed. They made a really good firefight, a movie firefight, because when you look at the base, you can see it says uh, Burleson Air Burleson Air Force Base above nearby, and they got the burning Cadillac that on the attack on the
Actually,
base.
the
And
sign that says "Peace is our business" is outside of all military attachments in the United States. So that was an actual sign, not meaning to be ironic at all. But the picture outside of Ripper's office was of Heathrow Airport. It wasn't a military base at all.
Wow. Was he throw out when they're inside the office, but then on
Yes.
the attack by the yeah, and it's all shot handheld,
Yeah.
really feels visceral, really good, a different style of shooting from the rest of the film. Works beautifully. The just so much in that film just works incredibly well. I was thinking anyway. I had my thought and it went away. It's something we were talking about. Oh, I know. I was going to ask you just with our ages. We're growing up at this shift in sensibility, which is the name of that article, really good article on the kind of a shift in sensibility,
Yeah.
where you can get movies that are made that question what the heck we're doing with these strategies, nuclear strategies, really making us think. A shift in sensibility, and so that's when I remember kind of coming, I remember the early shows, pop culture, The Man from Uncle, Batman, and
Yeah.
it's kind of during this shift in sensibility where it's like Man from Uncle is starting to, instead of being so serious about the Cold War, is starting to critique and do a satire on the Cold War. And so but in that age, I was going to say, do you remember some, besides Duck and Cover, or including Duck and Cover, what
Mm.
are some of the things you remember from the Cold War? Not necessarily Batman and Robin and Man from Uncle being satire, but what do you remember of the original? Have you got?
Well, in the small town that we both lived in for some period of years, there was a siren, an air raid siren that would go off every noon. They would test it. Um, in the town that we worked in together and taught in
Right.
together for many years, they had fallout shelters in some of the older
Wow.
buildings. It still had the little civil defense signs that these were fallout shelters. They had them in the small towns too, and so you saw that stuff. I always wondered what it looked like down there. Never went in one, and didn't know for a long time that the siren that they did at noon wasn't some plant whistle or something. It was actually just an air raid siren that they tested every noon in town,
Wow.
and you could hear it everywhere. I mean, that was before the days when you would expect everybody to have their TVs on all the time, and so that kind of
Good
stuff
point.
was still there,
Was still there.
and so there was that thought. There was an insurance office that my father was a contractor, and they built an insurance office for someone, and they wanted to make it bomb proof, and so it had like 12-inch thick walls, and stuff like that. Yeah, it was there, and
It was
and
there.
uh, things like The Man from Uncle and Get Smart all happened about the time that Batman was on, when they found out that they could make things real silly, and people reacted to that. I think more of that had to do with the Vietnam War, that things were so serious that television got very silly. That's when Laugh In came in, and Get Smart. The Man from Uncle turned kind of goofy. Lost in Space went from science fiction to the robot cracks jokes, and a lot of stuff kind of went into a I don't know what you would call that kind of humor. This uh, uh,
Definitely some satire involved in there
it was
too.
it was satire, but it also was just kind of unstrung lunacy.
Right. Well, but speaking of that, the one thing I remember, because when I was in that age, I was in the Panhandle, uh well, this 63, 64, I would have been in the Panhandle, and little town called Borger, Texas, up in the Panhandle. There
Yeah,
was a sign. I'll never forget this sign. I think it was there for quite a while too, but it was a big old just billboard. Get us out, get the US, get us out of the godless UN. And then the other thing that the sign, it showed the communist symbol and it showed the UN symbol. See the similarity? And so that was some of that extremism that
yeah.
you could see, the Cold War extremism. Uh, I'm surprised the sign didn't mention fluoridation and things affecting our bodily essence. But but
I
that's one
remember
thing.
I remember when I was I guess I was in high school at the time, that they were talking about fluoridating the water, and there was a big controversy about the city doing that. I didn't know what their problem was with it at the time, but that was probably something to do with that. Um, Also, I think they were afraid people were just being poisoned by it. Nevertheless, let's see. Let's go one other thing that this film has. Only one woman is in the cast, and
Interesting.
that's
Yes.
Turgid's secretary, who's seen in a bathing suit under a sun lamp, and that's the last you see of her. Otherwise, she's on the other end of a telephone call, uh, in which he says, "Make sure to say your prayers."
That is Tracy Reed, and
Yeah.
she is the daughter of, I think, Carol Reed, the famous British director,
Yes.
and they did use her photo for the centerfold, which was and and her mother was very upset about that. They apparently they draped over her bottom on that centerfold a book called Foreign Affairs,
Yeah.
but uh, but yeah, she's the one woman we see in the entire cast, and which would have been the case back then. They would have, would not have been any. Yeah, there's no fighting in the war room, and there's no women in the war room either. That's
Yeah. It's true. So, anyway, a very effective movie. I think that in our brief here to do classic films, I don't know if you could call this a classic film, but certainly it had an impact. It had
oh,
an impact
landmark film.
on society, and in that a lot of the quotes from the film, I think we use sometimes without even knowing where it came from.
Right. That's exact. And oh, right. Use the quotes and ideas, and we don't even know where it came from. And it. This is one of those cases where you're going to be enriched, as usual, if you go back to the source and watch the film. And so, oh, just a brilliant film. And
So I
Kubrick, phew, what a role he was on as a director. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. He was already meeting with Arthur C. Clarke right after this film was released to start work on 2001. So, uh, and of course, he went on to do quite some things. There is a sequel that was planned for this. He had already outlined it, had it on cards, and wanted Terry Gilliam to direct a follow up to this film, which would have had everybody in their minds after 100 years or whatever. And he died before he could finish the treatment, and Gilliam
Would have
didn't
dealt
hear
with the
about it.
mine shaft gap. The
Yeah,
mine shaft gap. That was
mine
another.
shafts. Yeah, yeah. But
That's
yeah.
I
But
have an
anyway,
answer
Terry
to one of
Gilliam
the.
said that he had not heard about it until after Kubrick died, but
Oh,
would
till
have
he
loved to
passed
have
away.
tried it. Yeah.
I have an answer to. By the way, this would not have been a traveling roadshow production.
Okay.
The those were, and you hear I've heard Quentin Tarantino, I think, use that term. The idea was that they were big films like uh
Ben
uh
Hur.
Moses, or yeah, Spartacus. I mean, as
Yeah.
a Spielberg film, or but just
Um,
big
Lawrence
budget.
of Arabia.
Yes, yes, and they would come to your town, and it would be a big event, and they would all have films that had the entr'acte and the intermission, all the
Yeah.
special stuff that
Bridge on
would
the
come to
River
your.
Kwai was another one of those.
Which one?
Bridge on the River Kwai.
Absolutely, and they would kind of come to your town as a traveling roadshow, and apparently Hollywood, kind of something to drum up the interest in Hollywood, get the word out to cities everywhere that these huge, big, giant films were going on, and it's funny. I've always had the connotation as something the opposite of that. That when you hear traveling roadshow, I always think of an indie film, a small film. This,
Yeah.
I didn't get distribution, so I'm bringing my film to you. And but that's what a traveling roadshow is. That's kind of
Okay.
yeah.
Very interesting. Well, I think we have destroyed the world and decided what to do afterwards now. So we can talk about what we're going to do next week. We're going to be talking about AI, which that's the most recent film I think we've ever talked about. So that should be interesting for next week.
And
And
Kubrick's the last film he was connected to. That yeah,
yeah,
which is
he
yeah,
yeah
keeping with
we
our
need to
Kubrick.
get a list of all his films because he had quite a catalog of different kinds of films. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
this is far away from 2001 as you could get, and Eyes
right.
Wide Shut was as far away from anything else as you could get, and
Yep.
so there are other things we could talk about, but I think we're going to put Kubrick aside for a while, and after AI, and then try some other things. Maybe try Lawrence of Arabia. Uh, I don't know if we have time to watch that before.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we'll think of something. But AI next week. And for those of you who want to see what I have to say about Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, I will have another review on Saturday. And then back on Tuesday with another episode of Farscape. So that's
Oh,
all
sounds great.
up and coming. So thank you, Professor. Always a treat to discuss movies with you, and we'll see you next week.
So much fun.
Mm-hmm. Meantime, please click like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and join us next time. Until then, don't go far.